I could perhaps add that this isn't live. We are playing out these images, but it's as good as live. This is how things really take place. And pretty soon we'll get to the content of what the leaders have been saying as well, particularly Prime Minister Modi. So that's a format that's normally followed when these multilateral gatherings take place, whether it's the SCO or BRICS. In fact, I was witness to one particular gathering in Russia in 2015 in Ufa, where both the BRICS and the SCO summits had taken place at the same time. And at that time, India was not a formal member of the SCO. Of course, it's a founding member of the BRICS. But India was granted admission along with Pakistan in 2015 into SCO and formally joined, both the countries joined in 2017. If I could come to you, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, one can only speculate right now as to what kind of submissions President Xi might be making, but China did have an extensive agenda planned, and that was reflected in the theme for this 25th gathering, 25 years of SCO as well.
Yes, I think the Chinese perspective has been that we live in an extremely complex world, number one. Number two, they think that there are changes happening in the international order that happens only once in 100 years. This is President Xi Jinping's personal view, and it's the Chinese view which they have articulated time and again. So they interpret this as the decline of the West and the rise of the East, if you like. That is their interpretation. They will certainly be making the point to the audience that at a time when the US seems to be the big disruptor, if you like, and at a time when the US is withdrawing from its traditional allies, like the European Union, Japan, South Korea, they will portray that China is actually the fulcrum around which a stable international order can be created. That will be their perspective. They will be quite happy to co-opt countries like Russia, India, and of course the other leaders who are participating. They obviously want to assume the leadership of the global South, the mantle of leadership of the global South, and they think that the time has come for countries to cooperate on a spirit of equality, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. One of the things about SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is that the charter specifically says you should not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. Now, that is not the perspective of US and other countries, if you like, at this point. So they do have a charter of cooperation, and where they accept cultural diversity, they accept countries with different models and political systems. They accept that countries can be equal even if there is a power differential. After all, if you see the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China looms large. It is the only 15 trillion economy, if you like. India is next with 4 trillion and so on. So really, the Chinese who have put out several initiatives, you got the Global Security Initiative, you got the Belt and Road Initiative, you got the Silk Road, but I think they will use the SCO, and use may not be the right word because they do talk about it to others, but they will use this opportunity, if you like, to actually set out their vision for an international order that is very different from the liberal international order that took place after the end of World War II. That will be, I think, the attempt of President Xi Jinping. Russia, India will have their own views, and the way typically, Gautam, these things happen is that leaders are given an opportunity to make opening remarks.
7 minutes.
The opening remarks typically will last 10 or 15 minutes, where I think each leader will do two things. One, the leader will highlight the issues which are relevant for his country, his or her country. So if India talks, India will obviously be talking about the issues that are important for them. For example, the breakdown of the multilateral trading system and the WTO, will occupy an important part of the leaders' declaration. The WTO has gone for a 6, as you know. So it's really become a law of the jungle in international trade with the tariffs which are different for each country, every country doing whatever it wants, and so on and so forth. So I think this will be a matter of concern, for example. Then, of course, you come to the thorny issues, and you mentioned two of them, which is Gaza and Ukraine. But there are other issues as well. And then, of course, you've got the global issues which have completely been put on the back burner. And that is things like climate change, public health. You guessed right. So these things, nobody is even talking about it.
Well, they will. These leaders will. I'm sure these
Sorry?
leaders will.
Yeah, exactly. These will, and I would say the last one, which is important for India, which I think I said earlier as well, is we will want to see a reference about the condemnation of terrorism, or at least the terrorist attacks in Pahalgam. That's very important for India. I don't know what the leaders will be able to achieve, but I think we need that, and to that extent, I hope the leaders can agree that there are no good or bad terrorists. The Astana Declaration made it clear that there cannot be a distinction between good and bad terrorists, but we need now implementation of that statement, which means that no matter who commits a terrorist act, that terrorist act needs to be condemned. So all in all, a very interesting kind of occurrence. There used to be a time 5 years ago when some of us in the Foreign Service would interpret the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, RIC, as somewhat antithetical to the G7 grouping, for example. The G7 is a Western grouping, as you know.
Correct.
But G7 being what it is, I think SCO has a golden opportunity, because right now SCO seems to have more power behind it compared to G7 and other fora. There's also been an economic shift, isn't it? The center of gravity has shifted. You've heard this. This is a cliche now to say that the center of gravity has moved from the west to the east. China has been most responsible for it, but also India. We are still the fastest growing economy despite everything. And I think the future really is about India and Africa. These are the big markets. So all in all, I would say this is an important, I think the fact that this is happening at an important geopolitical moment cannot be overlooked, Gautam. If this is not an ordinary SCO meeting happening at an ordinary time, if these are extraordinary times, and this summit is happening at an extremely crucial geopolitical moment. Two wars are raging, global issues are unattended, the multilateral trading system has gone for a 6, the UN Security Council is incapable of consensus, and institutions like IMF, World Bank are under pressure. So, as a French political scientist said, this is polycrisis. This is not crisis in just the political sphere, economic sphere, or cultural sphere. It's a polycrisis. Crisis afflicts every sphere of human life. At a time like this, leaders have a tremendous responsibility to react to those crises. People are worried about jobs. People are worried about inflation. People are worried about conflict. And so at a time like this, the leaders have to really rise to the occasion. In that sense, I also see a big responsibility on the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yes, it just seems like a storm swirling around the world 24/7, 365, and we're trying to break out of it, but for now, it just seems that the sun will take some time to reveal itself. But Professor Bhardwaj, again, this sending out a clear message perhaps to that one man in the White House, and one can't fail but think, what will Donald Trump do now? Will he act in a certain manner that might moderate his attitude, which has been so far to punish every country which at one time was friend or even foe? Or he will double down on what he's been doing, and 50% tariffs on India, next day he'll say 100%, or he'll try and ignore it and see that it passes by unnoticed?
I think Trump himself doesn't know what he will do next. So he is a person like that, and I think India should not waste time while muddling with the Trumps and these things. I think what India had got a right platform today. And I think this it can make it through SCO. SCO is very important for India's policy and India's their own concerns. I think that India has three clear-cut policy objectives, and these countries can become instrumental to come out with these three policy objectives. One is, of course, the security, and in the security there are two aspects that India is concerned about: the terrorism, one, fundamentalism, two, and insurgency and separatist is three.
And
you
conflict.
can see that all these three issues, all these three problems originates from this SCO region. You can say Pakistan, Afghanistan, Northeast, supported by external factors and all that. If India can make it that you have to be bothered about India's these internal security issues that is originates and supported by the external neighboring countries or external forces, I think that would be one of the achievements that Prime Minister Narendra Modi can gain it. The second is, of course, the external security threats that from the presence of extra-regional powers also concerns India's in its periphery. And I think that these, if they are not coming with the strategic considerations, and you can keep these extra regional powers including China and the Americans from this territory would be more stable, the SCO and the SCO can help in. The second objectives that I do find, and the SCO it can be instrumental, is the economic development. And from where you can bring the economic development, you need a constant uninterrupted supply of energy resources. Where are the resources? It is in Iran, it is in the Central Asian Republic, it is in Russia. And I think that these are the members of the SCO, that energy supply can bring the development into India. And I think that would address the economic development, not only India, the other South Asian countries, and these South Asian countries will flourish like anything. So I think this is an opportunity before Prime Minister Modi, and he will posit that let's have greater economic cooperation, and let's have better and energy security, not only for South Asia, for entire SCO region and SCO countries. So I think that kind of posture and gestures among the SCO countries would address and bring the stability in these countries. And third, very important aspect is the political stability. And we have seen that there are a lot of political instability is taking place either in Myanmar, or you go to Afghanistan, or in Pakistan, and in Iran, and even in the some of the Central Asian countries that So if these countries cooperate constructively and address each other's concern, these regions would be politically stable and will have better opportunities and for the development of their people. And I think that SCO countries. The SCO countries can have a resolutions. Let's support each other's in politically and economic development, and let's have better political stability. If these resolutions will be considered in this SCO, I think that would be a win-win situation for all the SCO countries, instead of muddling with the bilateral issues and bilateral concerns, and that would also resolve or build a trust among these SCO countries, and the rest of the world will automatically understand, Trump will automatically understand that you are no more there to play your game, divide the South Asia. What he can, let him enjoy tea with the Munir, General Munir, and let him endorse indirectly the terrorism. But if these SCO countries will come and will condemn any kind of terror and all that, the Munir will also understand that the realities of what the Russia and what India and what the Chinese are looking forward and expecting from Pakistan. And that would, I think, that would be a sustainable development that would bring the sustainable development. And I think this is the goal of the SCO, that let's have the sustainable development and green growth. And that would only possible when you have that kind of risk and when you have that kind of understanding among the countries. And that would bring the prosperity and development in these and this would transform the Asian countries and will develop the entire Asian community. So I'm looking forward. Let's the India and China and Russia cooperate constructively in Southeast Asia, in West Asia, in Central Asia and or South Asia, and that if this would be the zone of their constructive cooperative engagement, that would resolve number of the conflicts and problems within South Asian within Asian countries.
Yes, certainly. Ambassador Mohan Kohar, the other concern, of course, has been how to keep economic development going. That's been an increasing concern for the SCO as well. We've seen that reflected in declarations talking about development strategies in Astana. It was till 2035. I believe in this particular gathering as well in Tianjin, we'll see something on development strategy that China wants to put out, a model really. And India has its own model where economic development is concerned, which is through self-reliance and building upon one's own capabilities to ensure that the economic engine starts churning in keeps churning in high gear. We've seen good economic numbers coming out very recently when Donald Trump was dismissing India and Russia as dead economies. So do you think that is something that will also be put center stage here by Prime Minister Modi, and perhaps he talked about others as well?
Absolutely, Gautam. I think the most important challenge faced by these countries, even including China, although I keep saying China is in a different category because it's a 15 trillion economy. It's the only economy which has a double-digit GDP in terms of trillions of dollars. Others all are single digits. But even so, the fragmentation of the world economic order is the biggest problem for countries of the global south. Because there is a fragmentation of the multilateral trading system, there is a problem with regard to access to markets, access to technology, access to finance, and access to fairer ways of trading, and especially things like, use of environment and labor standards and so on. So this is going to be the most critical. If countries of the SCO want to develop themselves, and even China is facing this access to market problem, we need open markets. And if we need open markets, then countries have to coordinate among themselves. It cannot be that each country does whatever it wants, in which case, if as Mahatma Gandhi used to say, an eye for an eye will make everybody blind at the end of the day. So that's what is happening.
And trade and investment have to go hand in hand. That is also something that will be underlined.
Absolutely. I was going to say trade, investment, intellectual property rights, technology, finance. You are no longer in a situation where by just exporting shoes and textiles and leather and tea and coffee, you can become a big economy. Knowledge economy is going to be extremely critical, which means, for example, so far SCO may have only dealt with it tangentially. You have to deal with AI. Artificial intelligence is going to be such an important part. I will be very surprised if the SCO leaders do not come out with a declaration on artificial intelligence, where the views of countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization may be very different from the views of the countries of the G7.
Have they been even collectively articulated as yet? So far, have they been collectively articulated as well? That's a subject that perhaps the SCO has left untouched so far.
I suspect. I have only gone through the Astana declaration. I haven't done 24, 23 and 22, but you're probably right. And even if they have, they've probably touched it very tangentially. But I think now they have to look at it closely. And this is why what I'm given to understand from my friends is that there are different groups of people working on a final declaration, and it'll all come together. And then the final declaration will be put up to the leaders, who will then endorse it, obviously. I mean, the leaders are not going to read it word by word between you and me. Their Sherpas will do that. But what I'm trying to say is, since you raised the economic issue, it's not just trade and tariffs. That's what I want to say. It's a lot more than that. It's technology, intellectual property rights, finance. The biggest problem facing these countries is finance. I also want to draw your attention, Gautam, to the fact that the charter of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization says Central Asia is the core of the SCO. The SCO may have expanded, but at
Yes.
the end of the day, the institution was essentially established with the Central Asian region as the core. Now, this is important for India too. I mean, between you and me, there is also a battle for influence that's going on in Central Asia. There is Russia, there is China, there are other countries. But India has very old and civilizational links with the stans, as I call it, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and so on. And this
Yes.
Central Asian region, therefore, is very important even for India. We have a lot of soft power influence there. I was in Central Asia recently and I was surprised to see so many students from India learning medicine of all things in Uzbekistan when I went there
Yes.
recently.
Yes.
So you have lot of people to people connect between Central Asia, India, Central Asia, Russia, because many of them were former Soviet republics,
Yes.
and Central Asia and China, because China has a looming presence now in Central Asia. But I think so. This kind of coordination is also important. It's all right. I mean, countries can compete for influence. There is no harm in that, as long as we do it with transparent rules of the game and we don't really, hurt each other. That's fine. But I think what I'm trying to say is, let this not be reduced only to Russia, India, China. Central Asia is the core of the SCO. We must also listen to what the Central Asian countries have to say about a full range of issues, is what I'm saying.
Oh yes, I think India has been very conscious of that. I referred a little while back to 2015, what had happened in UFA. That was a summit that was of BRICS as well as SCO together, where India was taken on board along with Pakistan. India formally joined, of course, 2 years later in 2017. But that was a time, that was a trip that Prime Minister Modi made in just his second year as the nation's highest, chief executive, so to speak, where he not only went to Russia, he went to all the Central Asian countries as well. And that was a landmark trip, really. And that's the kind of consciousness that India has had about this region. And it wants to extend that in every manner possible. But the other issue I wanted to ask you about, as far as this charter of the SCO is concerned, since you've been referring to it, is what does it say about, if at the core it's Central Asia and security, resolving border issues? Because as long as that does not happen, how do we trust each other?
So that's an excellent point, Gautam. The problem, as I see it, is that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization explicitly forbids countries from interfering in each other's internal affairs. It talks about borders being inviolate, sovereignty and territorial integrity being respected, and all that.
But when they're unresolved,
sorry?
but when they're unresolved, what happens then?
Yes. So despite that, you not only have unresolved border issues, as you say, but also new issues which have arisen. And so that is something that the SCO does not pronounce itself, because in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, there is no vote. There is no provision for a vote. Leaders have to accept everything by consensus. And if even
Unanimity.
one country objects, then that process just falls through. That provision falls through. So hitherto, what has happened is, SCO has not addressed thorny issues, because if you talk of Ukraine, if you talk of Kashmir, somebody or the other is going to object. So why would you even waste your time? That has not happened. So to some extent, you are right. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is not the mechanism or the forum to address bilateral issues which are thorny. The explicit mandate of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is to allow bilateral issues to be solved bilaterally, which between you and me suits India fine. Because we've been saying that, listen, we don't want external mediation. Other countries have been saying, listen, leave it to us, we will sort it out. So the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, when it was set up, was essentially a security-dominated setup, where it was felt that terrorism, cyber threats, and so on are the most important. Gradually, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is also has extended itself into trade, people to people ties, cultural ties, and even new issues like artificial intelligence, cyber security, climate change, etc. But apart from pronouncing rhetorically on issues like Myanmar, Afghanistan, and other issues, SCO does not have a mechanism for dispute settlement. They don't, because it is not a forum meant like that. So you have to keep that in mind. They can certainly urge two countries to get together and solve the issues, but beyond that, they are not going to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries.
All right. I'm being told that our person on the ground, Jessica Taneja, is back with us. Jessica, what fresh inputs do you have for us? Because we've seen the formal part, the plenary, where the leaders make their initial submissions to put across what the different members, the 10 core members of the SCO, feel about this gathering, as to what should be deliberated and what kind of conclusion should emerge from it. 7 minutes each, I believe, was the time allotted. So what have you been hearing? Because we haven't had the content yet in terms of the audio or the text of the speeches of the leaders yet. But just tell us, what do you have there since you're on the ground?
Unfortunately, Gautam, the screens right behind me are also not giving us the text and audio. We're also waiting for it here. But I'd like to mention what I've picked up on the part of the draft declaration that is being discussed. Interestingly, Gautam, if those details are mentioned in the draft declaration, which I'm about to give out, would be very interesting, because it was going to mention terrorism in all forms, is going to condemn terrorism. That will include, let me be a little cautious there, could include the Pahalgam terror attack, as well as Gaza and other conflicts that are taking place around the world. So the focus really on that draft declaration would be to accommodate all the countries, concerns around terrorism, and make sure that it's explicitly stated that these are the concerns and security challenges that collectively all the member nations would like to address and collaborate and coordinate further on, and also find alternate trade routes when it comes to such geo-economic tensions that of course get affected by these conflicts around the world. And if you look at how the trade actually happens, is mostly on the seas. 80% of the trade that the world sees happens on the seas, and the kind of incidents and hampering of the trade routes because of various conflicts certainly gives these member nations more more momentum to talk about how they can come collectively and initiate trade. And also because the connectivity would be much easier because of the geographical proximity. So that in a sense does make a lot of sense, and we'll wait for that draft declaration. If it does mention Pahalgam, I think that would be great for India's efforts and its point or its centrality for the SCO attendance.
And any other chance encounters for Prime Minister Modi, Jessica, that might be making headlines perhaps tomorrow?
Well, we're expecting his bilateral meeting with President Putin for now. And in a short while, we'll get to know those details. We had anticipated that he'd be meeting President Putin. You saw those pictures earlier that made quite the headlines. And I'm sure that particular momentum would certainly continue as they both meet and sit down and discuss on certain bilateral issues. They have a special strategic partnership, both India and Russia. And certainly there's lots to discuss, from defense to many other sectors, trade, and of course, energy as well.
Certainly, Jessica. So stay with me. Let me go to Ambassador Mohan Kumar. The info that Jessica's picked up in terms of what might be reflected in the declaration, do you feel that it is par for course? It is the way these nations should be reacting to what's happening in the world right now, and then acting, coming up with an action plan as well, strategy as well, to address it?
Yes, I would say from what Ms. Jessica Taneja is saying, I would say it's par for the course. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there is a reference to Pahalgam. After all, we have received condemnation of Pahalgam terrorist incidents from almost all countries of the world. So that is par for the course. I think it's the latter part of your statement that is important. You talked of implementation. And that is going to be the biggest challenge for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. while all countries come together in Tianjin and make statements and express solidarity with each other, once they go back to their capitals, Gautam, reality, geopolitical reality hits you very hard. All countries, without exception, they will find that when they go back to their capitals, it is each country for itself, and then they will have to recognize that there are some serious problems which they have to face by themselves, and so on. So that is one important aspect that needs to be
Yes.
kept in mind.
I don't know if you can
I'm
see
not
the screen, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. We're playing out the content of what President Xi said at the plenary in terms of graphic pointers, and he's basically talked about how the SCO nations have been interacting with each other, and he's mentioned trade, how it is already $2.3 trillion between them. He's also vowed to strengthen people-to-people ties within the SCO. It's also said, President Xi has also said that the SCO is committed to advancing genuine multilateralism. That in itself is a very potent comment. We consistently uphold global fairness and justice. Okay, some pinch of salt there. She says oppose hegemonism and power-driven politics. That seems to be pointed towards west, perhaps towards Washington. I don't know. She reaffirms commitment to global fairness and justice. These are the pointers that the president has made, the Chinese president. He's also said world faces a time of turmoil and transformation. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. She calls for pursuit of common good. Yes, that's why the leaders are there in Tianjin. And SCO members delivered groundbreaking historic achievements as well. So that's something that's been noted by President Xi. And SCO transformed borders into ties of mutual trust. Well, that really remains to be seen, but SCO unequivocally against outside interference. So that's the point that Ambassador Mohan Kumar has also been making. That's part of the charter of the SCO, and trade being underlined there in a pretty explicit manner. $2.3 trillion is what is the level of trade between SCO nations, and he's also vowed to strengthen people-to-people ties within SCO, and that is possible. One of the means, of course, is trade. The other is connectivity. And there you have all the pointers that President Xi has made. What do you make of these remarks, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, that President Xi has made?
No, I think the remarks are appropriate. I'm not entirely surprised. What struck me was the extent of intra-SCO trade, 2.3 trillion. I didn't know that. And that seems quite significant, frankly. Of course, China would have been the main trading partner for most countries in SCO, and that's fine. So that was interesting for me. But otherwise, I think what President Xi Jinping is trying to do is be the elder statesman. He has been in power for a long time. He is saying that, listen, China within the SCO is going to be a factor for stability. We are not going to introduce uncertainty and unpredictability. And of course, you know who he has in mind when he says that. Unlike other leaders, he says, I'm going to see whether China can play a useful role for all of you. He's, of course, got every right to refer to Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives that China has undertaken. That's fine. I'm sure we will talk about Mahasagar and so on. So it's fine. Each country will actually emphasize the initiatives, the economic, trade, security initiatives, the political initiatives that they have undertaken, which they think will contribute to stability and predictability in the world. So it's absolutely fine, I think, what he has said so far. I think what would interest me greatly is whether China announces more plans for promoting economic trade and technical cooperation in the countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, members of the Shanghai Cooperation. That would be interesting for Central Asia in particular, because they would need South-South cooperation, they would need technical assistance, they would need funding for many of their projects, and they will be looking to China, India, but also other countries to see how much they can devote for their development. And that is important, I think, to keep the Shanghai Cooperation Organization going. If you look at BRICS, Gautam, for example, they have a bank meant for the purpose, which is funded by China. SCO doesn't have anything like that, but they have some funding mechanisms within the context of certain schemes. And I think that will be important to see during the course of the day. But I will be very, very interested in what the Indian Prime Minister is going to say as well, because that will be full of significance at a time when there is tension in relations between India and the United States. What India says at the SCO forum will also be very, very closely watched by everybody.
Yes, certainly. And I don't know if the figure of $2.3 trillion is a trade within the SCO or just China's trade with the other SCO nations, because China, of course, has substantial amounts of trade, not just with India and Russia, but other countries as well. But I'm not sure if it'll amount to $2.3 trillion. So it must be within the SCO nations taken together, perhaps. We'll have to do some more than back of the envelope calculations on that to figure it out, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. But what is also important is that President Xi has very clearly said that there is a move perhaps to set up an SCO development bank.
That's big. I hadn't heard of it. And if that is true, that's a very welcome move. Like I said, Central Asia should not feel neglected by the SCO. The SCO images and the statements, they seem to indicate to me high-level politics. You know, the trilateral, Russia, China, India, these are big countries which can pretty much take care of themselves. But Central Asia is the bulwark, if you like, the ballast of the SCO. And they should not get the impression that our needs and our requirements and our priorities are getting overridden by other countries. So, excuse me. So I think it's important that there also be a fair amount of emphasis given to the Central Asian countries.
Well, certainly, I'm being told, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, we have to thank you at this point, because that's all the time that we have with you at the moment. I wish it was longer, because there is so much that is emerging now that we could talk till the cows come home, really. But for the moment, thank you so much for joining us and being with us at this critical juncture, not just for our broadcast, but for the entire world, it seems. And we still have Jessica, our person on the ground, my colleague there in Tianjin. Jessica, quite a lot of interesting pieces of information emerging from what President Xi has told the gathering of leaders, basically unveiling, it seems like, a new ambition. It is, of course, the Chinese ambition that is reflected there, but a new ambition for this grouping itself, which is I guess the ambit is being widened to the area of finance now through a bank. We already have a new development bank, a BRICS bank, now an SCO bank, it seems. He's saying set it up ASAP.
That's correct, Gautam. Yes, you have the new development bank, you have now the Shanghai Cooperation Bank as well. If that is announced, we'll wait for those details. But that will be an interesting aspect of how the Chinese view their relationship, which is of course a lot to do with investment and economic development, because that is the kind of role China envisions itself in the world, apart from of course re-establishing the traditional Silk Route that it always wanted to do now through the Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, reservations on the Indian side about that, but China has sort of made its investments all across the world, and it's not new that it wouldn't focus on something which is so close to its own doorstep, which is all the countries that are present here would need some kind of assistance from China, and in fact for most countries China is the largest trading partner, so it only makes sense that they come up with this new initiative of another bank which could help fund initiatives as this does. You talked about the BRICS bank as well. It has made quite a lot of, it has done quite a lot of work, and also India at the same time has also been a participant, and a lot of initiatives have been undertaken in India and a lot of projects through the BRICS bank as well. So the fact that the focus really stays on the economic engagement as well. Yes, the SCO framework is largely about dealing with terrorism, extremism, But at the same time, when you look at China and its own strategic interests when it comes to all these countries, it's also to give out a larger message that it is China that can deal with the economic disadvantage that the Americans have left, as it always is. China, a $19 trillion economy, certainly has a lot to offer to nations who would seek that economic help at this point, given the current geopolitical situation and the tensions that dictate the world right now, and China possibly sees that role.
Yes, certainly. I mean, it would be interesting to hear the take of other leaders on this as well. Another lending institution, multilateral lending institution, when of course we have institutions like the IMF as well, which has been giving handouts to all sorts of countries. We don't know if these are, they seem to be like bailouts, whereas these lending institutions, at least what BRICS set up in terms of the new development bank, has a different criteria and a different focus really in terms of the global south. So perhaps something more for the global south here. Jessica.
That's correct. The focus for not just China but India has also been the global south. See the kind of challenges countries in the global south are facing post-colonialization. There has been a lot that they had to deal with, and then in the recent past you see there was COVID that affected their economies quite badly. Then there are frequent climate related challenges that again affect all these countries, and then there is the entire Indo-Pacific region which also sort of reaches out for some kind of help here and there, given the kind of tensions that we see on the seas. So of course India again then also emerges as an important partner, not just for security purposes but also for an economic strengthened economic partnership. So all in all, it does make sense not just for China but for India also to engage with these countries economically and strengthen that relationship and perhaps find new avenues of mutual interest.
I guess this will have to be fleshed out a little bit more. This SCO Development Bank, if it's called that, or Shanghai Development Bank, if it's called that, because we already have the new development bank, the BRICS Bank, which lends on certain criteria and of course is focused on lending a helping hand to those nations that need it the most, especially when it comes to addressing challenges on the climate front. We don't know where whether there will be an overlap or there will be some sort of a concurrence really in terms of these two institutions once this sort of a bank is set up. Did you hear anything before it was mentioned by President Xi about this sort of a bank emerging out of Tianjin?
Well, we'll wait for those details, to come out, Gautam, and when the declaration is made and the outcomes are made more clear to us. And the fact that if China does take that initiative, it would be pretty much on the expected lines, because that is the kind of role China envisions, and it has in the past as well. So setting up a new mechanism which would fund projects for the countries of the global south is certainly going to go a long way. And it depends on the kind of projects they're going to focus on and what kind of help are they going to extend to these countries, which they already are. So those details, of course, will have to be fleshed out in some time from now.
And a piece of data that the Chinese president put out, about $2.3 trillion trade between SCO nations, that also gives another dimension to the SCO altogether when trade has become such a big issue in the current scenario.
That's correct. Trade has become an issue. Most countries are undergoing an uncertainty when it comes to tariffs and sanctions, etc. So of course every nation is here to advance its own strategic interests, look at what is important to it, not just the security concerns but also the economic advantages it can have, and multilateral engagements, so to diversify its trade and not completely be dependent on America's aid, etc., where China wants to come in and not at least replace but be there as a partner they need at this point. And similar role that India has also envisioned in this, whether it's funding projects across the countries for global south, which India has done in the past, and a vision it shares with China at this point as well. But India and China, as you know, and mentioned even yesterday, if you notice from President Xi's meeting with Prime Minister, those remarks, it does mention that India and China are important for countries in the global south. Together they can work for co-development and work towards co-development of these nations and help them out in various projects with the kind of expertise it has. For example, India has been very keen on going ahead with its digital public infrastructure to many countries who are greatly benefiting from the payment gateway system that India has developed, and perhaps a successful one at that. So you could expect more initiatives from both the countries, especially if you talk about diversification of trade and finding alternate routes, not particularly focusing on de-dollarization, but yes, trading in local currencies is something that most countries are open to, given their neighborhood and their proximity for making trade more lucrative.
Yes, the more trade that they have, the more it becomes possible to trade in each other's currencies, and then you do not really need the dollar for at least those segments of trade. But at the same time, I wish there was data also for not just trade but also investment, because that is the other track that is a very fruitful one between nations. And we'll talk about development assistance, talk about lines of credit. That sort of a data would be very interesting to produce as well, because that again puts in context how these countries are working with each other and even for others to ensure that everybody is along for that ride on the road to prosperity.
That's correct. And China has been giving out line of credits to countries whose economies have been battered either by climate change or by the severe tariffs imposed by Donald Trump and his administration, a very rigorous way of doing it. So, the Chinese of course come in, and they're also looking for investments, for investment diversification. If you look at how they've tried to ease tensions with most of the countries, it's certainly interesting times on how global trade has changed to an extent. But again,
Jessica,
de-dollarization is a distant dream right now.
But Jessica, the way China lends, hasn't that led to a lot of misgivings around the world as well? It hasn't produced very good results even in our own neighborhood if you just look southwards towards Sri Lanka. So is China indicating that it's willing to relook at how it lends to other countries as well?
Well, Gautam, interestingly, when Sri Lanka was going through its own set of economic woes, it was India that had extended a line of credit, but China had given a yuan swap. Help indeed, but not the way that India did. So India had been a valuable partner back then as well, and it continues to be one, funding various projects. If you particularly talk about Sri Lanka there, you and I both would recall what the situation was and the political uncertainty with the Rajapaksas and then the new regime coming in. So of course there is a lot that changes when it comes to the dynamics of trade and lending line of credits, which India has done not just to Sri Lanka but to Maldives and other countries as well. Whichever country has faced certain economic disadvantages, India has been able to reach out and help. But with China, there's always a tricky terrain. It's as most Western analysts would call the salami slicing or perhaps dead trap diplomacy is what they most prefer to use. So those kind of speculative moments do exist when it comes to China lending that line of credit or providing yuan swaps.
So is that going to change now?
Well, I don't want to be speculative again and jump the gun, but we'll see what happens again in the future. But when it comes to economic advantages, if the country, China is always there to look at your ports, port development, the Hambantota port, as we know, and many others, that the Gwadar port, with CPEC, although that project is in the dumps right now, but at the same time, there is a lot that the Chinese investment is able to get out of, and certainly it will aim for that. Apart from all the criticism it receives from the world, it continues to build that Silk Road, which is now called Belt and Road Initiative.
Yes, certainly. I mean, unfortunately, since there's a bit of a vacuum of information, what seeps in and what rushes in really is speculation, Jessica. So I will have to ask you to do a bit of that as well. But at the same time, in terms of what the other leaders will be putting across at this forum, of course, you've mentioned the issue of terrorism as well. But in terms of development strategy, do you think there are different perspectives within the SCO nations as well, and that will come to the fore as well. We've seen President Xi's perspective. We'll see Prime Minister's perspective as well. We'll have to see to what extent they match each other or if there are divergences as well.
But at least for the Chinese, it will be a delicate balancing act. For India, it's reaching out to Central Asian nations and, of course, looking at its own strategic and security concerns in the neighborhood. And if you talk about more development projects that they might push, well, we'll know that in a short while from now, but not much has been told except the fact that the Chinese development and funding continues in various other countries that have been either battered again by climate change or COVID, and it continues to be the voice of the global south. But at the same time, development is the focus for China, and mutually, of course, there are always concerns and limitations when it comes to this. But again, those details will have to wait, Gautam.
Yes, certainly, and I'm being told that at the moment we can let you go, Jessica, so that you can gather some more information for us and then quickly come back and share as to what is happening there, as to what kind of submissions have the leaders made. You've already told us a little bit about the kind of declaration that could emerge, very constructive one for the moment. It seems the kind of information that is filtered through. Let's hope that the speculation that we have indulged in, it leads to, of course, it coming out in black and white as well, because that will be a very good progress on the kind of agenda that the SCO has and the kind of track that it's set for itself in terms of not just putting out a strategy, but a plan of action as well. Thank you, Jessica, for the moment. And with that, I'm bringing this segment of our special coverage to a close as far as the SCO summit is concerned. But we will, of course, await more information on what is really transpired in Tianjin. And, of course, there's that key bilateral meeting of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin as well. We've seen some glimpses of the kind of possibilities that are there in terms of the bromance or the bonhomie that we saw, not just between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, there before the leaders formally sat down for the SCO summit, the plenary there, just ahead of the family photo. And of course, President Xi was in the mix as well there too. So that in itself is expected to make global headlines, already. But perhaps we'll have more that the engine will produce. And we all look forward to that. On that note, thank you so much for joining us. And keep watching DD India for all the latest, not just from Tianjin, but from around the world.